Natalie, I'm super excited to have you joining me. I've known each other for quite some time now. I would love it if you would give us a little bit of background about your career, first of all.
Sure. I'm glad to be here and with you at TIFF.
Yeah.
I wish it was in person, but this is the next best thing.
Yeah.
So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've known I wanted to do that for quite some time. When I started in my graduate program, I studied typical child development, and very focused on child development and autism spectrum disorder. And partway through my graduate school career, I became a parent. So my husband and I adopted a little boy who was 8, just about 9 years old at the time he came to live with us. And he had a history of trauma and high trauma needs. So trauma was that thing that other people did, other psychologists. And I referred clients if they came to me for that reason. I worked with typical child development where everything is rainbows and butterflies and nothing terrible ever happens to children. So I all of a sudden had this little guy in my home and didn't have any knowledge or information on what to do. And of course there's no instruction booklet, as many of you know. So I really quickly had to learn about trauma. And I jumped into this world from a parent perspective first. And my graduate program then sort of led me in that direction. And my internship, part of it was spent in an inpatient hospital facility, working with kiddos who were part of the juvenile justice system. And most of those adolescents had histories of trauma. So I learned a lot about trauma intellectually at that point. And I still always thought that as a clinical psychologist working primarily with children and development, that I would not continue to use trauma work in my daily operations. But as we know, trauma is everywhere, and I actually use it all the time. So here in Houston, where the Stewart Center at the Westview School, our clinic is based, we see a lot of young people with neurodevelopmental disorders who also have a trauma history. So it's usually one or the other that brings them in, but often both tend to be in the mix. And if you're parenting a child with high trauma needs, there may be a neurodevelopmental disorder like autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, things like that in the mix as well. So my life's work at home has helped inform my career. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. So would you like to give a little bit of an explanation about how you and I came to know each other and how we became friends?
Absolutely. So Tiff was one of the first people I met kind of in the trauma mama world. So she was at the time caring for our son. So he was in kind of emergency respite with Tiff, and it was a rehoming situation. And he came to live with us. We actually just passed our 10th anniversary of having him in our home. And so Miss Tiff in our house is like an extended family member, and we enjoy getting to see her when we do travel to Washington, where she now lives, to visit my husband's family. So, and we've got 2 other boys in our home. So I can relate if any of you have been on this COVID break with children, it is hard. And, I'm here to empathize with you about that. And especially if you have teenage boys, the hygiene and the showering, we're all experiencing that with you.
Yeah. The teenage boy thing. Yes, that is challenging right now. But yes, so we definitely have a special connection, our 2 families, and I think that that's part of what this whole video podcast thing has been all about, is that over the years, I have these great connections with people that we've made over the years. And I think that people who are more newly doing this, getting the opportunity to connect with families that have been doing this maybe for a long time is such an important thing. It's something I definitely wish I had early on. And so, so that's part of what has made this something that I've really wanted to do. I know that we have talked a lot about trying to connect people, and that's something that through the Attachment and Trauma Network, which you have also done some work through, trying to connect people is a big thing in trying to support each other and help each other find our way. One of the reasons we did this packet that we have been talking about a lot in the wake of COVID-19 was to try to help families find their footing during this time of increased isolation and decreased social support and support through school and all of that. So today's topic, I thought you would be perfect for, because of what you do both professionally and because of your family, what you do with your family, that topic of collaboration and choice within structure, and why that's so important when you have kids that have had some difficult early experiences, some trauma-related needs. And I thought that we could just kind of jump right into that, because that, to me, I know in my own parenting transformation has been very, very important. I used to try really hard to get my kids to comply with the structure I had in place. And when I learned that really collaborating with them and bringing them into being a part of creating that structure, when I learned to do that, I know that we started to find a rhythm and a harmony a lot better. So I don't know if you want to just start speaking to that idea.
Absolutely. And I think talking to a lot of veteran families or senior families who have had kiddos with high trauma needs, we do find these things in common. And I know our own journey, when we went from dual income, no kids to 8-year-old, and we had not parented previously. So we were trying to bring him into our kind of grown-up life. We bought corn dogs and figured that we'd done things like that right. But it was difficult. And I will never forget the day that we discovered kind of scheduling and the collaborative need for scheduling. We were actually on our way to a family event to have dinner with my family. And Elijah was in the back seat, and he just had a complete meltdown. And he started saying, like, "You never let me have any control. You never give me any power. And I never know what's gonna happen, and I don't feel right." So I was just trying to talk him through it and figure out what was going on. How do we solve this problem that's sort of ambiguous? And all of a sudden, my husband said, "Do you mean you need to see a schedule for the day?" And he said, "Yes." So that is the moment where schedules in our household were born. And we had used them professionally and coached other families to use them, just never really thought that it was a need for our high trauma kiddo. And it was life-changing just to be able to see, okay, I'm going to have meals, there's a bedtime, somebody's looking out for my well-being, even things like brushing your teeth that aren't fun, at least somebody's got my needs in mind. And then we had times on our schedule that for us we called free choice, but it's like the want tos.
Yeah.
That were things that we collaboratively decided. So, here are the things that we need you to do: shower, brush your teeth, a homework assignment, whatever it was. And then what are the things that you want to do that are important to you? And those sometimes looked like cooking TV shows, board games, Nerf wars. We had bad weather drills. We had intruder drills. We were very flexible on what that want to side looked like. We learned really quickly that no is not always the most helpful word. So the third piece of the someday list. We
Yeah.
didn't have that name for it, but we would, say things like, well, that's a great idea to do on a rainy day, or to do after we've saved several $1,000s,
Right.
depending what the request was. So in the packet, it's nicely organized and laid out for new families to be able to have a holding place for all the things that are important to the parents, all the things that are important to the children, and then those wishes and dreams that we can't wait for, difficult to wait for, but aren't going to be on our schedule today or tomorrow.
Right. And I think you're hitting on such an important thing there. What I think in the way that I would explain that is that for our kids, what we found, well, a couple of things. When I listed out, I thought when my kids were little, that it was really clear to me that if we didn't have a schedule, we would have complete mayhem, right? So I would put together a schedule, but what I found was this complete resistance against that schedule. It was like, you telling me everything that I am going to do is not something that I can buy into, that I can be okay with. That just feels like power over me, right? So being able to shift and be collaborative. And so that's where that need to, want to list came in. It was like, what can you have control over, and how can we work together so that what needs to get done gets done, and what you want to do can also get done. And I think learning together to balance those two out is such a huge part of learning to not have an adversarial relationship with a child that experienced trauma.
Right. And so much compromise is involved in that as well. I know, for me, having an 8-year-old, I thought of things like, well, we're going to, brush teeth twice a day, just like the dentist wants, and we're going to floss, and we're going to very quickly, brushing teeth once a day. I hope there's no dentists in the audience. But, we had to go with what works. And when I work with families, that's what I tell them is we have to meet this child where they are. And that may look like 10 minutes of reading. You might have to say, I'm super sorry, reading teacher, but we could not complete your 40-minute reading assignment. We did 10 minutes, and that was the best of our ability. Last night, that was the best we could do. So there does have to be that give and take and that compromise, because a lot of times these kiddos have been in situations where they've been completely out of control and powerless, and any inkling of that feeling coming back to them is going to trigger behaviors or meltdowns or shutdowns that just aren't conducive to the household or learning. Nothing really good comes of that.
Something that just came back to me that I remember talking to you about early on. I remember something that you said, and it was already a part of something that we were doing, but it was so great to hear it from you because it was just so affirming. I remember talking to you once and you telling me about talking to a teacher and saying, I'm sorry, in our house, relationships come first. Like, I remember you saying that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I think I've also been an educator at the Westview School. I'd come from a family of educators, think highly of educators, and my goodness, can't imagine this COVID experience without all of the work and dedication that teachers have put into maintaining structure for our kids who aren't in school. That's really been incredible. And they know that kids come from different places and are at different levels in the class period. But I think that sometimes when homework demands are too big and too overwhelming, it can dictate the schedule for not just the child, but for the entire household. And we often need to get some freedom from that and, break away and not empower parents to let teachers know. Some families want more reading, and that's fine, great, send those families more reading. And other families, even when the child may need more reading, they might not be capable of doing it, especially at home, if their brains aren't in a state for learning. So to really optimize the child's learning long-term, we have to develop the relationships at home. We have to get the behavior regulated at home, get the child regulated so that they can be in a state for learning. And sometimes that does look like telling the teacher, you know, I'm really sorry, we tried, this was our best effort, relationships and regulation come first.
Yeah.
And we'll keep trying tomorrow, we'll keep trying every day. Thanks for your understanding.
Exactly. And what I have found with my kids is that it's all about whatever season we're in right now, you know, like right now especially. And I think that teachers and educators and schools and the education system as a whole right now has been really amazing about recognizing the need for for relationship right now. I think under these circumstances, especially right now, I think there's a recognition that relationships are super important right now. And I'm so grateful for that, because I know for us, there have been periods of time where our kids have been kind of going through something or just been a little more dysregulated for whatever reason. And we've had to say, okay, we're going to have to back off focusing on math or whatever for a little while. And we're going to have to put more attention and focus into relationship. And we're going to take a deep breath, and we're going to recognize that once we've given attention there, that catching up actually comes really easy for our kids. Is that something that you see?
Absolutely. And especially if those teachers and other caregivers are understanding in those situations, it further strengthens their relationship and their trust with the child. So I've never had a problem then with kids working really hard for that teacher that understood. You know, when the teacher puts the product above the relationship and the well-being, and with best intentions in mind. But you know, if they don't have that knowledge, I find that the child or the adolescent is going to be more resistant to performing for that teacher in the future. But when they really take time to say, you know, hey, I want that for you too. I want you to feel good. I want you to feel safe. I want you to be regulated. Let me know when is a better time, or let me know when you're feeling better. I find that those kids do, you know, they're the ones that will then go above and beyond for that teacher or that family member, or that caregiver, when that collaboration is offered to them. It's just a huge trust building factor.
Right. The other thing I think is that sometimes the stress and pressure, in my own experience anyway, can come from me as the parent. Like, I really want to be where everybody else is. I want us to be where everyone else is, and I want us to be fitting in, and that stress and pressure gets to me. And I feel like I get to that point where I'm like, okay, we're finally fitting into the norm, you know, like we're like right there fitting into the norm. So if we can just, you know, get the math done, or if we can just stay on level at the, you know, so I think that pressure getting to us too is something that we have to really watch carefully. I know that I have had to watch that carefully as a parent, and I don't know if the parents that you work with fall into that, if that's something that you work with or see.
Absolutely. And I liken it to, you know, a family with a preschooler, when the teacher may say, you know, your child's cutting skills are behind, their scissor skills. And when you have a child in preschool, that's a big deal. Their cutting skills are behind. What if they go to first grade and they can't cut like everyone else? Will they be made fun of? Will they graduate? How are they ever going to be employed? They won't be able to cut. But if we can just encourage those parents and ourselves to take a step back and think, you know, this is scissor skills. There's so many more important things in life. Now, I don't mean to undermine what the teacher is saying, but we always take it with a grain of salt and think, okay, so this is a really big deal in pre-K. We can get some occupational therapy. We can make cutting fun at home. We can work on it, you know, have fun while we're trying to build these skills. But ultimately, we all have the cards that we're dealt. You know, I know some very wonderful, well-adjusted, happy adults who aren't great with their cutting skills. So just taking that step back and realizing that it isn't the end all be all. And for older kids, milestones like getting a driver's license at 16, moving out or going to college at 18, sometimes those milestones looming can be tough for us as parents when our kids aren't there with everybody else's kids. But it's okay. We have to meet people where they are to allow them to have that opportunity to accomplish those things. And then we make accommodations for those things that, are weaknesses, like cutting skills.
Right. One of the things I wanted to mention, just because I know that a lot of the families I work with are having this specific issue right now, are transitions. And I know lots of us, our kids have difficulty with transitions anyway, but right now, during this time, it feels like all of us are going through major transitions all the time. We're going back to work, we're not going back to work, we're going back to school, we're not going back to school. It's all up in the air for all of us. And what I'm noticing is that parents and kids are having a really tough time managing transitions more than ever. So the parents that are going back to work are saying, their kids are really having difficulty with them going back to work, and there's a lot of resistance and that kind of stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so transitions are really tough for this group of kiddos, right? Transitions in the past have led to harmful outcomes, losses, complete changes and disorganization in their life. So small transitions, even things as little as a substitute teacher, can really throw these kids off. And we're talking about life transitions right now that are way bigger than that. So, I can only imagine the first time my oldest had a substitute was his worst day of school. And he's always been very articulate and was able to talk about that. And we said, your teacher was sick. She's allowed a sick day. And he said, she left me. She didn't tell me she was leaving. He was mad at her.
Right.
So I can only imagine for kiddos now who, none of us knew we weren't going back. None of us knew we weren't going to get to say goodbye to our teacher or our classmates. And for parents right now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the job market. There's a lot of uncertainty with childcare for summer or going forward. If our kids are going to be doing online learning over the summer or in the fall, can we keep our jobs as scheduled? Do we need to make major life alterations that are going to affect our income? Have our lives been unexpectedly shaken and our income is altered? Those are things that rock our sense of safety. And if our sense of safety is rocked or off kilter, our kids are going to pick up on that. They're hypersensitive. COVID itself is something that rocks our sense of safety, right? If you just turn on a television or have access to the internet, kids are going to see the threat to their safety and the threat to safety of others in the world. So keeping it in perspective, I think, is really important. Helping them understand that things like COVID are rare. The fact that someone gets so sick and has to go to the hospital for something like COVID is rare. It can happen, but it's not likely to happen to us because we're taking precautions, because kids seem to be a little more protected from COVID. So just helping them understand and keep that in perspective, but also with our jobs, our workplace, our school, we're real good at talking about the problems or the transitions or the things we're afraid of, but we're not always very intentional about talking about possible solutions. So that reassurance at the end of every statement, if you say, oh gosh, I don't even know if you're going to be going back to school in August, but then letting them know, we don't know what school's going to look like in August. We do know that you're going to be safe and cared for, and we're going to make sure you keep learning because that's what mom and dad are here to do. So making sure that there's some sense of safety when we're talking about transitions, I think, is also real important. Maintaining that security for these kids is critical. So if we're talking about financial problems or differences in income, letting them know, honey, no matter what happens, we're still going to take care of you. We're always going to be able to feed you. We're always going to be able to keep you living here or to live in a safe place with you, so that they know. And these children might need to be told that a little more explicitly than children who haven't had their sense of safety rocked like these high trauma kids have.
Soothing the nervous system, continually soothing the nervous system for our kids that have those hyperactive threat responses. So important.
Right. And it's a great life skill for them too. They will learn through our modeling, through our teaching, then they'll be able to internalize those skills and hopefully do it for themselves as they're adults, just like we do for ourselves. You know, oh no, what's going to come of my life or my job or my family? Then we're able to talk ourselves through, you know, I'm not really sure, but it's going to be okay.
Which is, I think, the next point that I was going to make is that the importance of, I think that the way our kids respond to this that is going on is directly correlated to how we are responding to it. So if we are calm and we are soothing ourselves, and if we're taking care of ourselves the way we need to take care of ourselves so that we are not constantly in that threat response, then our affect is going to be contagious and they are going to then feel what we are feeling. But when we are not, so whatever we need to do to manage our re-entry in those transitions, I think is really important too, right?
Absolutely. And whatever that looks like in each household may differ. But whether it's a tag teaming between adults, right? And it doesn't even have to be a partner. You can be a single parent and tag team with other adults who are caregivers to be able to take that break, to keep regulated. And it's so important even to model that for our kids. So our kids have seen, in some cases, poor behavior modeled, or what happens when people don't take the breaks they need. So there is no shame in letting a child know, you know, I am so stressed. I have to go take a break. I need to go take a walk around the block and calm down before we talk more about this.
Yes.
And modeling that for our kids is huge.
Yeah.
So also it helps us stay more present. If we do what we need to do to be calm and regulated, we can be more present and available for our kids. And that is key. If we're just going through the motions, and I think, you know, everybody will know what I'm talking about when they say going through the motions, sort of, yeah, and not really making eye contact, not really getting on the floor with a young kid, not really getting interested in your adolescent's interests. There's that distance that sort of grows between you. And these kids with high trauma needs are hypersensitive to that.
Absolutely.
And they are going to spiral when they feel it. So whatever we have to do as adults to be regulated, to make eye contact, to share a genuine smile, to really have fun on the same level, you know, with that wants, letting go of some of those needs and dealing with some of those want tos. In my opinion, the want tos are as important as the need tos.
Yeah. I think that's so important to point out. I think that's really important. And another thing, just going back to the transition, one of the things I've been suggesting to families is, with older kids in particular, is if you know that you're coming back from being out in the world, like coming home from being out in the world right now carries a higher level of stress than it used to, because you're out there with the germs, right? And you're coming back home. And when you're coming back home, if you need a minute, if you know you're going to need a minute to get recentered and be okay, if you don't have it in you to walk in and be like, hello family, like you used to, that's okay, especially if you have older kids and you're able to talk to them about what your reentry plan is going to be, and so that they know what to expect, so that they aren't taking that as a rejection. Because what I'm seeing is that a lot of older kids, their parents are not able to give them what they used to when they are coming back home, and they are experiencing that as a rejection. But if you tee it up and frame it so that they know and they can actually help with the reentry, it's actually been really empowering for them. And
Yeah,
so,
and I was just thinking the same, like offering them a role in that and offering, this is what I have to do when I come home, or I need to go change clothes, or I need to, and even outside of COVID, there are some people that need to come home, change clothes, decompress, and then they're ready to put their game face on, which,
yeah,
if you're parenting, it takes effort and energy. And that's fine. And I agree completely. Being transparent with children about those things helps them feel safe. If we're faking and pretending and trying to appease them, they're going to catch on to that. And I'm telling you, even the kiddos who are supposed to have some social difficulties, like those on the autism spectrum, or who have some symptoms there, they're still hypersensitive to that perceived rejection. And I've been having some families dealing with it as well when they have some kids in school and some not in school. Mm-hmm. So especially this week and the next few weeks, where schools are letting out at different days or times, but also if they have college students at home, or older adult children at home, and they're doing school at the table with the younger kids, and the older one is feeling left out. Even just of course they're welcome to join, but inviting them to join. You don't have to do your schoolwork in your bedroom. You can come do it at the table with us. Well, I don't want to. Might be the result that you get, but just that open invitation. Okay, we just wanted you to know you're welcome here, and love seeing your face. Yeah. And letting them know, and creating some time in the schedule to have sort of that one-on-one time with each kid and with each adult, or in different groups, I think is also essential. And I know that's something that your family did and talked to us about as well, but I think that can help ease transitions too. So we're getting less of each other, and we're all sad about that, right? You're going back to school, I'm going back to work, and it was fun to spend so much time together. I want to keep spending time with you. So let's have special time that's just for us. Would you like to do that on a Friday or a Saturday? Or so handing some choice and some control over, and letting the child be involved in what we do there. So we're sort of trading in this lots of together time for some special time that we can do on a weekly basis.
Right, that's great. I wanted to talk a little bit about the like in my family, it really never worked for us to have a schedule that was, we do this at this time, we do this at this time, we do this at this time. It really did help for us to do it with our kids specifically. And I think every family is different. I really do. For us, it worked to go, okay, so it's really important to you to have a lot of control over when you do your chosen thing. So if you do 30 minutes of something on your need to list, then you'll get to do 30 minutes of something on your want to list. So that's how we did it, because it kept it very even, very fair. My kids were very, very focused on fair. And so that felt very fair for them. You want to maybe talk about some other ways? I mean, I don't know if that... Yeah, I would love to.
I think you nailed it with fairness. So the perception of fairness, and I think that's important, the perception of fairness, because I might have 2 cookies and one is broken, and one child sees that as 2 cookies versus 1 cookie. Now, I as the adult know they're the same, but it doesn't matter what I as the adult know. What matters is that child's perception. So the perception of fairness is hugely important. And when we know that there's going to be something perceived as unfair or could be perceived as unfair, I think talking about it beforehand is important. So we have kids that have different activities opening at different times. Your karate student might be able to go back to karate before your ballet student can go back to ballet. And that is not fair. So being able to discuss it and talk about it and what can we do. But what you hit on with the schedule is as well, I often tell people, do not put times on the schedule, right? So times on the schedule set you up and the child up for failure, because what you're going to be teaching then, well, at least if it were my household, what we'd be teaching is we're chronically late we put things on our schedule we don't do, we skip things on the schedule, and we just, accomplish what we want to and leave the rest off. Those aren't really great life skills. So being able to leave times off and keep it very flexible. The only thing that should ever have a time on the schedule, if you have a child that worries about the future or needs to know when things happen, might be something that's set in stone, like school. School happens from 8:30 to 3, period. Then at 3, you'll see mom, you'll come home. So letting them know who's going to pick them up, sometimes those things can be important, but I completely agree on the areas where we have flex, leaving the time off, maybe even leaving them not even counting on the order. Sometimes we're having so much fun playing a game that dinner's going to be late. Maybe you don't even write down what is for dinner because you don't know, right? If you get caught in a game, it might change from chicken cordon bleus that are homemade to corn dogs. So leaving that flex time where we can also be teaching our kids that the things that we put out that we want to do and that we need to do are things that we actually do, and all of us have lists like that. So I have my need to do list. It includes the groceries, the floor, the dishes, I'm not going to accomplish all of those in one day. This is my need to. I'm going to pick something from here and then I'm going to reward myself with something more fun. So that's a very suitable life skill that will get our kids far, that we can model for them and teach them and help engage them in.
And then, of course, it changes depending on how many kids you have and what those kids' specific issues are, because I know some kids, like, they need to know exactly what we're having for dinner and exactly what time we're having it and exactly what bowl it's going to be in and all of the things. But, the general idea is flexibility within the structure, collaboration within the structure, as being a way to make sure that kids feel like it's power with instead of power over. That's really the spirit of it. For me anyway, that's where I come from with it. And I think that that's what I think is so important for kids when they have felt powerless, that it's really important for them to feel like they have power with their safe caregiver.
Right.
I
will encourage them to come back to you as a caregiver.
Right.
So when they need help, when they are facing uncertainty in life, when they're, not sure how to plan for classes or organize or pick up their room, that they'll come and you'll find that they'll start seeking you out for more and more because they trust you.
Right. I wanted to say, going back to that whole safety, security, collaboration, and having fun. I think that's the other thing, is just making sure that the day together isn't just about, I know for my kids, it had to be fun. Mm-hmm. Getting things done together had to be fun. If it wasn't fun, then that's when I had that total resistance.
Right. And I think about what works for us as adults too. If we went to work and had a boss that was a complete taskmaster and just, this is what you're going to do, and by this date and this time, that wouldn't be a very rewarding or fulfilling job. It would be hard to feel proud of your own work. It would be hard to develop relationships at work, and it would be really, really exhausting. Mm-hmm. So that's true for our kids too. And I'm a big fan of working while we play and playing while we work. So it also is going to encourage kids to not be as deterred by the need to list. The need to list should not be a list of like awful, terrible, bad things to be avoided. These are just things that we need to accomplish. They need to be on our radar. So we're going to pick one from here and one from here, and that makes a good balance. But there is no reason why on your need to list, if you have to fold laundry or sort laundry, that can't be fun. You can play basketball while getting laundry to the washing machine or into the washing machine. When you fold it, you can have races, towel folding races, and you can also be on teams with your child in things like racing so that it doesn't amp up the competition, because I know, right, we can't always do competitive things with these kids. Sometimes that comes in way later, but working competitively together to beat your own time. Let's see how fast we can fold this big sheet. okay, ready, time it, go. And, racing to beat your own time. So as a team, but working together, we can have lots of fun. Even picking up a room
And
could be fun.
And I think sometimes on first listen, things like that sound like, oh yeah, that would be great if we had all the time in the world. But what I have found is that actually that gets us there way faster than
Yep.
the whole idea of you're going to do this and you're going to do it because it's the rule and because I said it's the rule and because that's the way it's going to go. Because that is what brings my kids to a screeching halt.
Right. And I completely agree with you in the getting there faster. So, right, it does take a minute to maybe get the parent regulated and get that game face of, okay, because we can't fake it. They'll know. Right. So if we're going to clean the room and have fun, that means we genuinely need to have fun. Right. I'm not going to, if I try to convince you how fun it is to clean your room and you see right through me, that's going nowhere. We've all experienced that or been on the receiving end of that. So we really do have to make it fun. And sometimes that might look like you going ahead with the need to while your child's kind of watching, like, I'm not sure. And I think that's fine. Sometimes I'll even assign kiddos a watcher role if they're not regulated or ready to participate. So when we have a lot of fun, and if you have more than one child, if you and one of the children are having fun and the other one's sort of holding out, we don't need to discuss the holding out, then offer them a role. Let's see how fast we can do the socks. You want to help? We got to do it. We got to beat our time. Where you can get them involved and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the transition for little ones? Maybe something fun to do with littler kids?
Sure. And I'm looking at that question to transitioning to something new. I think that when transitioning to something new, I'm assuming we're talking about kiddos who might be resistant or scared of something new. And I think being with them on their level, and like Tiff's talked about, talking to them about it. So we might, as we're going through the schedule together and we're collaborating on what the day looks like, if we're transitioning to something new that they've never done before, even if it's supposed to be a fun activity, like going to dinner with your family's parents or going to a birthday party or going ice skating, it could be really overwhelming and challenging for kiddos who have a hard time with transitions. So we want to just address that right out of the gate. I've always found that if we over prepare, we don't end up having problems. And you may even feel like, well, gosh, I think we over prepared for that, but you probably avoided problems by over preparing. And I was always shocked by not preparing some of the little things I thought, well, I wouldn't have thought I needed to prepare the child for that, results in an epic meltdown. So preparing means talking about it in advance. So this weekend, there's a birthday party. And it's going to look like this. Here's where it's going to be. This is what's expected. I love the idea of informational stories to help kids get a sense of what knowledge they need or what information they need about a new activity or a new thing that's going to be going on, and inviting them, do you have any worries about that? What thoughts and feelings do you have about that? So to try to get their input, let's try to address their fears. I know for my oldest, he was afraid he was going to make an inappropriate joke in the airport. Going to the airport for the first time was a really big deal. And he was afraid, like, what if he made a joke about bombs? Would he be arrested? So we talked about that a lot. We took pictures in the airport, which I was a little afraid of being arrested myself when I was taking pictures in the airport. But every child's going to have different fears or different insecurities about transitions, about something new, that if we can help them articulate, we can help them prepare. When they can't articulate it, some of the kids may be pre-verbal, right? Or they may have other conditions that limit their verbal expression. Then we take our best guesses. And worst case scenario, we're wrong. They'll tell us, right? They're pretty good at telling us when we're wrong. So we take our best guesses. I was thinking you might be worried about this new trip or this new person that we're going to be meeting. So I wanted to talk to you about it, and phrase it the way it is. That's our thought that they might be worried about it. We don't need to impose that on them. And they're really generally pretty good at letting us know if we're wrong. No, no, oh, was there something you are worried about? Did I miss it? You know, I was just taking my best guess. Sometimes that'll help encourage sort of reluctant children to speak up about their concerns.
Thank you so much for that question. And then the other, I was just going to add on to that, that with little ones, especially little ones who have experienced trauma, or experienced separation and that kind of thing, what I always do, if it's going to be something new that is away from their primary caregiver, even if you think they are old enough and past this, I always send something of yours with them, send something of their caregivers with them, because it's surprising to me how old kids still, that is still helpful for them. I've found anyway. How about you, Natalie?
Yeah, and we've also done like picture books sometimes. So taking, and that works for old ones as well, because they can then, you know, here it's to show people you meet.
Right.
You know, your brother and your sister or your mom or your family. So it is, and I think it doesn't matter how old they get.
Right.
These things are still issues. You know, at my house, just actually in talking with you about this webinar, we realized, you know, we haven't outgrown these things. And in fact, we may need to increase our structure in some areas and predictability in some areas and fall back to this need to want to idea. So we were, you know, just noticing like, I need you to come out of here. I need you to do this. I need, you know, you guys aren't doing enough. Well, wait, we can squash that. We know how to squash that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they don't get too old for it for a long time.
Yeah, it is surprising how. And then also the other thing I was going to suggest with the new stuff is managing the transitions with rituals. You know, having just, this is the thing we do always when you're coming home from this new thing, or we're going to this new thing. You know, there's going to be this thing that you leave right here, so it'll be waiting for you the minute that you get back in the car. All of that stuff that we do with really tiny, like toddlers, is really helpful for kids that are older too, I think.
Definitely. And some little ones need cleanup rituals because we're leaving one fun activity for something, even if it's another fun activity, just the transition can be hard. So, you know, think about what works if it's working in the classroom or in preschool. Talk to the teacher. They may have songs or rituals or transition routines that you can just implement at home that your child's already familiar with. And vice versa. You know, you may have if you're hearing that your child's struggling with transitions at school or in childcare, letting them know what is working for you at home. And if nothing's working in either place, it's still good to open the conversation, because whoever finds something that works, we got to tell the other one.
I remembered the thing I was going to ask you before. I wanted to ask, we have talked quite a lot about the kind of crossover and differences between caring and support for kids that are on the autism spectrum and kids with trauma-related needs. So I think that do you feel like you could go into that topic a little bit? Because that is something that I see a lot.
Absolutely. So, and I see this at home as well. My middle child is on the autism spectrum and has a long history of neglect and trauma as well. And then my day job, working primarily with students on the autism spectrum. Our clinic is in a school, the Westview school in Houston, that's for children with autism spectrum disorder. So I do have a lot of background in that. And some of the differences and overlaps that I see, one, children on the autism spectrum or with any neurodevelopmental differences tend to be, the research tells us, more likely to be traumatized than typically developing children. We also know that children who've experienced high trauma are likely to have a neurodevelopmental disorder of some kind, whether it's ADHD, a learning disability. So we have that overlap, which makes a lot of us parenting both parts. Children on the autism spectrum may have a history of trauma that is bullying. Bullying can be highly traumatic. So they maybe didn't experience chaotic early lives or turmoil or caregiver changes, but they maybe experienced some bullying, from peers or staff even. And that can be highly traumatic. They could take or sense trauma from something that didn't cause trauma to other people, like a car accident, a single incident type trauma. So that does cause a lot of overlap in the field. In the treatment aspects, I do see some differences. So the children on the autism spectrum often tend to enjoy higher structure. So like you were saying, they may want to know what's for dinner, what color plate, what time is that going to occur, and you better not be a minute late, for a lot of reasons. If you're going to write down that time and that color, those things had better be available. Right. Or it's going to be some conversation to move past it.
In that color. Right.
Yes. So they often will appreciate the higher structure, not just tolerate the higher structure, but almost want it, seek it out, feel more comfortable in that level of structure, where the children who are not on the autism spectrum may need more space to kind of, find their own wings and be more in control of the schedule and prefer a more collaborative, more flexible, ever evolving type schedule.
And more choice.
Yes, absolutely more choice. Whereas choice could be something that shuts down someone on the spectrum. Too many choices could be a problem. Right, or not. How do I make that choice? There's got to be a right choice. I don't know if I want milk or water for dinner. Why would you ask me that? How do I even know what to pick?
Could you please just decide?
Yes. So knowing the child, I think, is so important. And that's why even as a professional, I can come in with the tools that have worked for many families, but that's not my child when I'm consulting with someone. And I require the parents or the caregivers to be the expert on that child. And only together can our ideas work. And I think that's really integral in working with families too, because a lot of these families have been told, well, if it's not working, you must be doing something wrong. Your consistency must be poor. Or, if you were only more consistent, you would have less behavior problems. And I find in a lot of the families that I work with, that just simply isn't true. They have a different kind of a child with a different kind of needs that we have to accommodate for.
And that attunement is so, so, so important. Knowing how to read your child, knowing how to read their states, and being able to meet them where they are and see where they need choice and where they need structure and where they need nurture and where they need, it's just so important, that whole dance, right?
Absolutely. And I'm thinking, attunement, that goes right back to my child development days, because it does, that's something that parents and infants do very naturally. And when, a caregiver is holding an infant and the infant's fussing, the caregiver changes facial expressions to match that infant's facial expressions. And then together they come out of the sadness and into a happier state. So that kind of co-regulation that can only come from that attunement needs to happen with our children, sometimes when they're much older, sometimes even teens still. So we have to have a player on the team, at least one, who's really good with that attunement. And that's oftentimes where I can turn to the families and use what they know about the child. Or sometimes we coach families and help them to become more attuned to their child's state so that they then can join with them. They can be attuned together and we can co-regulate, because we can always co-regulate before we can self-regulate.
Exactly. And for our kids that did not get that in those early days, just that I know that for me, a huge part of my transformation as a parent was understanding that co-regulation is the pathway to self-regulation, and that my kids with their highly sensitized nervous systems and hyperactive threat response were going to need me to co-regulate with them for way, way longer than we would think a child might need that, than we really think is developmentally appropriate. My daughter's 21 years old and she still calls me to co-regulate, you know? And I think that that's such an important thing to know about trauma-related needs, that really, when you come right down to it, they do need that co-regulation for much, much longer. And the truth is we all need co-regulating sometimes.
That's right. That's right. And I don't know any self-regulators who didn't first co-regulate. It is absolutely the step that comes first. And if we don't meet that young person where they are in terms of co-regulating, they won't be able to self-regulate effectively. So whatever that looks like, and working in a school, we're big on promoting independence of the children. And that looks different for every young person. There may be a child that you need to hold and rock that seems beyond that. And then the self-regulation comes with, parents of typical kids or kids who haven't been through traumatic experiences. When their little one falls down, they get up and they sort of look at mom or dad like, should I cry? Should I be crying now? And if you say, you're okay, go play. That is co-regulation on the path to self-regulation. That is so advanced. That child might be 12 feet away and was able to just glance at the facial expression and then run off and have a good time playing. It might take our kids longer to get there. And if you're not at that touchless co-regulation, that's okay. Rock, hug, soothe, go for a walk for an older child if they're aversive to being touched. Something to get us in a rhythm and a pattern to where we can then start doing that from more of a distance, like you're saying, a phone call.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all do that, even as adults. A lot of us, use our parents, our friends, our partners to co-regulate.
That's right. Next week, we're going to be talking about regulation with Jane Samuel, who I think you probably know through ATN, probably, I don't know. And we'll go into that attunement and co-regulation and self-regulation. Really, we'll have a conversation about all of that next week too. But I think that is so at the core of really, it's at the core of state dependent functioning, which I think understanding state dependent functioning for kids that experienced early trauma is hugely, hugely important in caring for them properly. And I think that that's what you're talking about when you're talking about that attunement and that ability to co-regulate with them, and the knowledge that it's just going to take them longer, and that's okay, right?
Absolutely. If your pancreas needs insulin to keep your blood sugar balanced, that's okay. If you need medication for, blood pressure to keep your heart regulated, that's okay. In any of these other realms, we wouldn't even think twice about, is this okay? But because of the social expectations, it can make us wonder or question, are we doing what we need to be doing for these kiddos? And we are. It has to be collaborative, and it has to start at their level where they're ready. And even the want to, need to, that's a co-regulatory system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So we have one and then one and one and then one. And for our kids who on the autism spectrum who may have a higher need for structure, even if you're planning out the whole day in a structured schedule, you're going to need to alternate from the kind of need to and the want to. So we have to keep that regulation in mind throughout everything that we're doing. And the best way to regulate is collaboratively for this kid population.
And I think too, and going back to the difference and similarities between the kids that are on the autism spectrum and kids with trauma-related stuff, I think that one of the just similarities is that sensitized nervous system, right? They just both have these sensitized systems, and what that co-regulation and that collaborative sort of, stuff does for them is to create sort of a rhythm that for the day that doesn't exist sort of easily within them, that they really need help to establish that ongoing rhythm to get that to be the norm for them.
Yes. And so I have kids where they have difficulty even coming up with the want tos.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's something that's happening, so what I always think about, what is the internal process that I want to see happening or that would help this child, and how can I externalize it so that we can model it and teach it? So if they can't come up with, they have a sensitized nervous system and they're on the autism spectrum and they don't know what they want to do. Play can be really hard for those kids. Relaxation can be really hard. So we create like a choice box. And index cards, I love index cards and Post-it notes and a dry erase board and bubbles. That's my therapeutic battery.
Right.
You can fix or do almost anything with all those tools. But index cards are great. So we write down, maybe we have a brainstorming session for what are some want tos? What are some fun things that we could do during the want to? And if they can't come up with something, maybe a child who has difficulty making choices might want to draw one out of the box. What if I don't want to do that one? Put it down and draw another. And so we're teaching that practice that we go through, but sometimes when these little brains are wired differently because of trauma or because of developmental differences, the things that we take for granted might not be as easy, and we might have to explicitly teach them or model them for this group.
Right. Well, I feel like we could talk for another hour, but we'll wrap up here. But I wanted to say, first of all, I'm definitely planning on having you back, and your husband Ken is going to be back another time too. So we will definitely have you back again, and I look forward to that, and hopefully lots of times. And
yeah, we would love to.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, and it's so good to get time to talk to you. And thank you everybody that was here. I guess, anything last minute before we jump off of the call? We'll give it just a second here.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your packet. It's I've been using it already with families and talking to families about it. So I love that we just have these things that we talk about and think about explicitly where people can access them.
And also on our website, we have a resource from Natalie that we'll be talking about at another time. We've already put your game stuff. You want to mention that?
Right.
Yeah.
So I love working while we play and playing while we work, and turning games into thoughtful, intentional, productive ways of working with our kids. And we can talk about that through the ages. So Candyland's one of my favorite to use for young kiddos. I'm kind of a board game nerd, but we can talk all the way on the upper end for Settlers of Catan and, games that are more advanced for our adolescents and even our adults who still need some help learning how to be gracious winners and losers. Because let's face it, we encounter that a lot in life. And if we can be gracious winners and losers in board games, that is going to get us through a lot of situations in life.
Yes, it does. And I cannot wait for that topic. That is going to be fun. We are all major board game people in our family, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that. But we already have the resource up on our website, so people can access it now if they're wanting to play games with kids who have difficulty losing now. Thank you so much, Natalie. And I see somebody posted up there, I love Natalie, and I do too. Say hello to your whole family for me, and thank you so much.
Will do, and likewise. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.